Hey everybody, welcome into another episode of the Flyover League. Jamie Plunkett here with Noah Darling, ready to break down another great week in Big 12 baseball. Noah, you had a couple different day trips, I believe, to see some baseball this week around the Easter holiday. Just talk to me about traffic and the way you got to places this week. Was it full up on the roads, everybody trying to travel for Easter, or was it a pretty easy time?
Well, the beauty about my travel is that the peak of it was when I went down to that first game of the Kansas Utah series. And heading down there, it was Thursday. So we weren't even into Easter weekend all the way yet with the way college baseball celebrates Easter by just not acknowledging it and avoiding it altogether for the most part, minus you guys and some others in the league. But either way, uh, going down for a Thursday game, no problem. Middle of the workday for most people, so I didn't notice much traffic. And then the beauty about returning from that evening is I'm getting home at 1:45 in the morning from Lawrence, Kansas. So not much Easter traffic. I didn't see the Easter Bunny out there, but I-29 was not exactly full of travelers on Thursday night, at least.
Well, that's good. I'm glad for you that at the you know nice early time of 1:30 in the morning, the roads were very clear for you. That's
I'm not a
lovely
big
to hear.
Mountain Dew guy usually, but every time I find myself driving at night and I get very nervous about the idea of almost falling asleep at the wheel because I've been in that position one time before. Didn't die or anything, obviously, but it was like a college game day situation. Traveled out to Ames. I was awake for like 36 hours. Driving back, I'm literally like falling asleep, and luckily I had somebody else in the car with me. I would probably be dead if it were not for the other person in the car. But I'm a big Mountain Dew guy when I'm driving, and I will stop at gas stations and give me all the Mountain Dew you have. And it is the reason that I made it back safely. I think huge contributing factor.
Shout out to Mountain Dew for keeping you alive. That's really good to hear. Brand deal potentially in the future there as well. Very nice. You know me. I love a long road trip. Have
This
driven
was
out
just
to
3 hours, so I cannot
yeah.
imagine.
Made the drive from DFW to Tempe earlier this year for TCU. Arizona State have done that drive a couple of times now, actually, in the past few years. Uh, my go-to is always just black coffee. It does not matter the time of day. It does not matter if I've been driving for 1 hour or 7 or 13. I just pull over, stretch my legs for a second, get a cup of black coffee. I'm good for another 5 or 6 hours on the road. I don't know what it is, but I might have to try. Might have to try your Mountain Dew tactic and just
Well,
see. Maybe I'll
I,
get home
I
a little
don't want a
faster
Mountain
next
Dew.
time.
I don't want a Mountain Dew right now. Like I don't like Mountain Dew, but it works at keeping me awake. And I even threw in an energy drink. Didn't work as well. So there's something about doing the do. If they want to work that in, we can work that in every show. If you want, folks at Pepsi, if you're listening.
Well, you know who did the do this weekend? Let's get into some recaps of this weekend, and we're gonna start up in Morgantown, where the do was absolutely happening, but not for the home team this time around. Instead, it was the UCF Knights who take 2 of 3 from West Virginia. Noah, it could have been a sweep if we're being completely honest with ourselves here, and it could have been a sweep really without the two best arms on the roster for Central Florida, with Brendan Smith going down with a very similar injury to Zach James 2 weeks ago with the line drive to the face. I spoke with someone at UCF on Sunday. They said he was doing well. He received some stitches, had a bit of a concussion, but was traveling, but was released from the hospital on Saturday. Seems to have avoided major injuries, which is really good to hear. And then no Matt Saucer again for the Knights. Second week in a row, he has not appeared in his normal Saturday start. Uh, First of all, we'll get into the injuries and concerns here in a second, but first of all, just takeaways from Central Florida's weekend.
I was a little bit of a doubter when it came to the Knights. I can't really articulate why. Maybe it was preseason bias. I'll raise my hand and say that I had West Virginia winning the series, and frankly, wouldn't have been surprised if they swept it, which is more of a attributing to the way that West Virginia has played. But as much as me just being questionable about UCF, I'm no longer doubting the Knights. They can hit. They didn't exactly hit the home run ball in droves. Andrew Williamson had, I think, 3 on the weekend, which was, again, I also think the only ones they hit. But they hit the ball well. They got to some really good pitching that West Virginia's had all year. We'll probably touch on a second, but maybe some question marks around who should be starting where in that rotation for the Mountaineers. But I was also impressed with the pitching. You talk about it, the two main guys not in the mix for the most part, with Braden Smith going down and and Saucer not making his appearance again. Still would like to know what the deal is with him, but Max Murray stepping up out of the bullpen kind of sprung into the situation, really stood out to me on Friday. And then they ended up rolling it into Mateo again later in the weekend. He's been big when they needed him to fill that gap. And outside of that Saturday disaster where you thought, oh my God, West Virginia is just inevitable. They're the best team ever. Outside of that, it was really UCF's weekend. And I know that you were very prepared to just talk about them for 40 minutes tonight.
I was. We went into this weekend and I thought, okay, that was a really great job by UCF to scramble and put together a bullpen game after Smith goes down with the injury at the end of the first inning. And I was curious to see how the bullpen arms would hold up then on Saturday and Sunday. And the reality is they didn't have to do much because Mateo Gray was awesome on Saturday. Camden Wicker was awesome again on Sunday. And so I think Chris Sosnowski made an appearance in all three games, was great on Sunday. Not as good on Saturday. I believe he's the one who gave up the walk-off hit to Matthew Gravelin. But realistically, I think the way that this team is pitching right now is head and shoulders above pretty much anybody else in the conference, especially when you consider the fact that they're missing two of their best arms. There's not another team I think of that could overcome that in a weekend and still do what they did in Morgantown. We'll get to Oklahoma State in a little bit. I think they're kind of figuring things out on the mound a little bit here and there. Baylor had a pretty good weekend on the mound. TCU had a pretty good weekend on the mound and is still dealing with one key injury there. But nobody, in my estimation, has taken away two guys that have been, stalwarts in the rotation for this season and then had to go on the road and take a series like UCF did this weekend against a very good offense. I'm still a little concerned about UCF's offense. I know that sounds crazy, but they scored 20 runs. Well, yeah, 10 of them were in one game. They left a lot of guys on base. But when you're pitching the way that they're pitching, does that really matter? Probably not.
Yeah, we'll see what it means because the schedule still is ahead of them a little bit. It's not all in the back window. They head to Kansas this weekend. That'll be a tough challenge in its own right, but just the versatility that brings your roster if everybody ends up healthy in this pitching rotation, which you would certainly think that Smith will be unknown on Mr. Saucer. We seem to disagree on how that's said. Again, it's one of those deals. I don't know how you're probably right, but whether they're both healthy and back next weekend, the weekend after that, whatever that looks like, they now have five guys that you can count on, burgers and fries, for a regional situation, a super regional situation in Omaha. If they manage to get that far, that sets you up really, really nicely. So you never want injuries to happen, but I think I say it every week about some new team where, all right, you have an injury on the mound and some guy pitched well. That's really, really good for you if you get everybody back. But that's a big if as silence continues to surround who we thought was their ace, but now they kind of have like 3 or 4 aces. It's borderline unfair.
Yeah, and I think for me, kind of they answered one of my big questions about them, and that was what does this pitching look like against a lineup that can really do it top to bottom? And yes, the bullpen kind of frittered it away on Saturday. Sometimes West Virginia is just going to get you, I think, with the way that lineup is constructed, the versatility of it, the power that it has, top to bottom, it's capable of getting on base, right? And but at the end of the day, to limit them to one good game out of 3 at home is wildly impressive. On the other side, West Virginia's pitching, like you already kind of hinted at here, some big question marks. Dawson Montesa, our guy, I know we both love him, has really kind of been struggling on Fridays the last month or so. They decided to swap Maxiel and Chanson Cole in the rotation, and that doesn't seem to maybe have taken like they were hoping. Neither of those guys have been quite as sharp as they were in their previous roles. What's your assessment here about West Virginia's pitching rotation right now? Because I think it might just be the solution of switching Chanson and Maxiel, but maybe it's not that simple.
It seems to never be that simple with pitchers, especially college pitchers. I don't know why that is. I know that the narrative is always pitchers are so routine-based. You saw it, not to give us another preview, but Cole Carlone pitched on schedule, which was also off schedule from our point of view. He's pitching day 2 of the series, but again, we'll get there. But the way that you manage these guys is so mental sometimes that you get nervous with moving guys around. But it's worked with Kansas. They switched their rotation up, and all of a sudden, your guy that's been starting on Fridays for nearly 2 years is looking really good on Sunday. Dawson Montesa hasn't been starting on Fridays for that long. You have the benefit. He started every day of the weekend, I believe, at some point this season. You would think that he'd be perfectly comfortable moving around the rotation. Max, I've been told it's Yale. I've heard Max Yale, which sounds very Southern when you say it, but also very Yankee at the same time. West Virginia, Yale, and I don't know. But he's pitched on Sunday, Saturday. I don't know if he's thrown on Friday this year. And then Chanson Cole's just a guy that's thrown a bunch of innings at the D2 level. Ian Korn is waiting in the mix if they really want to shake things up. I don't think you have to press the panic button in that regard just yet. But that's 4 guys that I feel somewhat confident in being able to eat innings. And we've seen Dawson look really good. I hope he figures it out because, like you said, we bought a lot of stock. I don't think we're going to go broke buying more, but I'm continuing to buy it as long as it's on the shelf.
Yeah, I mean, you always buy the dip, right? Always buy the dip. And I'm still definitely a Montesa believer just because his stuff is so good. And when he's on, he's incredibly good. And we've seen that at times so far this season. It could just be as simple as saying, "Hey, Max, you're going to go on Fridays. Dawson, you're going back to Sundays. Chanson, you're going back to Saturdays. And we're just going to ride it out. And we're going to see what this can do for the next 2 or 3 weeks." I agree with you. I don't think it necessarily needs to be anything maybe more dramatic than that at this point. Because at the end of the day, West Virginia is such a good and balanced team that even if one guy isn't figuring it out or clicking quite as much as you want, you've got the offense generally to be able to make up for that and win a game 8-6 instead of 5-3, right? So again, we're talking about West Virginia in this kind of critique way, but they're still 20-8 on the season. They're 8-4 and third in the Big 12, right? Like this was the first series that they've even really considered losing in Big 12 play this year, and they've gone on the road to Arizona State and already taken a series there. They've swept BYU. They went on the road and took 2 or 3 from Baylor, right? So this is a pretty battle-tested team at this point. A lot of weekends ahead that are going to challenge them almost as much, if not as much, as this UCF weekend did. But I think that they probably learned a lot about themselves. Steve Saban's learned a lot about his guys this weekend. And at the end of the day, you're still in great shape. So, go back out there next weekend. I don't remember who they have on the docket. We'll get to that in a little bit. And just take care of business and kind of hit the reset button. And I think West Virginia is going to be completely fine, personally.
I would agree with that. They have, just to not steal your spotlight, they've got Tech, Houston, and Cincinnati their next 3 series. Cincinnati right now, well, who knows what Cincinnati is? We'll get there.
Yeah.
Not to keep previewing little pieces, but I think that a piece of just mixing up the rotation potentially, they've already played BYU. So as far as your Thursday through Saturday series goes, they only had one on the year because they managed to play on Easter, the rare jewel that is, that half the league managed to do, but nobody else in the country can pull off. But they no longer have to play Thursday through Saturday. So now you have Friday through Sunday, a routine the rest of the year. I think that means something as opposed to teams who have to manage Easter and then maybe a week or 2 later also play again on Thursday. That's a whole different ballgame if you really want to dive into the mentals of a pitcher.
Yeah, TCU had to experience that last year. They had BYU, I believe, 2 weekends prior to Easter. And so you had this 4-week stretch where you were Friday to Sunday, then Thursday to Saturday, Friday to Sunday, then Thursday to Saturday. And the question is, what the hell do you do with your Friday arm, right? Do you just keep them on Fridays every week of those 4 weeks? TCU chose not to. I'd have to go back and look. I'm pretty sure Lepore threw the first game of all 4 of those series. And so you're talking about a guy having 6 days off, then 8 days off, then 6 days off, then 8 days off. And we know that baseball players and especially pitchers are extreme creatures of habit. So to do that to a guy is tough, but yeah, I think the schedule works out well for them. I mean, they bulldozed right through Easter anyways, right? So that wasn't really a big issue. And now they get to kind of just stay on that same schedule. The one thing is if you want Yale, if that's how you say it, which feels weird to say, but
that's how
his
Mike
name.
Rudy says it. Mike
Well,
Rooney
it's
had
his.
said yeah a few times, so I
All
trust
right.
him.
Well, I trust the runes with my own life and my own name, so we'll go with his pronunciation of Yale. Um, it's tough if you start a guy Sunday and go to Friday, but since he threw on Saturday, it might not be out of the realm of possibility to say, hey, by the way, you're the Friday guy this week. So something to look for potentially. I don't know. Coach, if you're listening, just hit us up and let us know what's happening, please. Thank you. Let's move on though to the number 2 team in the Big 12. Obviously, UCF is sitting there at 10-2 atop the conference. West Virginia is at 8-4 in third, and the team wedged right in the middle is one that has kind of quietly won its last 3 Big 12 series after a bumpy first weekend in conference play. They swept Utah at home, which you and I think, both can agree is a very gritty, hard to fully get out of the way Utah squad. They never seem to be fully out of the mix there. And that's Kansas. The Jayhawks are 9-3 in Big 12 play, have looked much better as of late. You know, when I had the chance to catch up with Fitz about 4 weeks ago now, right after TCU and Kansas played that midweek game. And 2 things he said he wanted to see more of from his team were barreling up the ball more, making more hard contact, and more early strong starts from his pitching staff. And at least one of those things has happened every weekend since that conversation. And this weekend, it was mostly the bats. I believe they scored 41 runs in 3 games against the Utes. Tyson LeBlanc, incredible again. Obviously wins Big 12 Player of the Week and Big 12 Newcomer of the Week. This is a team that you're intimately familiar with, though, so I'm going to shut the hell up and let you kind of roll on Kansas here.
Well, I was down in Lawrence on Thursday night for the start of the series, but also Autism Awareness Night at Kansas, which is near and dear to Dan Fitzgerald's heart. I'm working on a story tying that into kind of how this team is coming together. It just feels very kind of a microcosm of this team and the culture that Fitzgerald's building, but an emotional night in Lawrence that, at least on Thursday night, started off back and forth. I think that there was I don't have the exact stat because I was frustrated it was happening because I was trying to get home before the middle of the night. But there was a run scored in nearly every half inning. I think that there was definitely a run scored every inning. It was just one of those where we're going to put one on the board and then we're going to stop scoring them. It was just very frustrating where it's like, I don't want to be here for 5 hours. I enjoy baseball, but I also enjoy sleeping in my own bed. But then the game came down to the 9th inning, and there was just this feeling that Kansas wasn't going to go away quietly. And that's just a feeling that this program has emulated the last 2 seasons. I think they had 22 comeback victories last season, and they were just known as the never say die Jayhawks. That was Jackson Hauge's catchphrase surrounding the team. And even though Hauge's not there, I think they have 30 newcomers on this team. It seems that they've carried that baton pretty seamlessly, where they now have that grit where you go down in the 9th inning, maybe you're down 2. In this case, they were down 4 on Thursday night, and they say, you know what? We're actually not out of this game. Maybe they're down 3. I think they're down 3. They hit 4 home runs in the 9th to win the game. But solo shot, get a guy on, hit an opposite field home run. That was very Moneyball-esque because there's 2 outs in the 9th, and you think of that scene where Billy Beane he's got his head down, and then all of a sudden Scott Hatteberg hits the home run, and he looks up like, that sounds like a home run. I did exactly that because I'm like, do I really get to go home right now? And yes, about 30 minutes talking to Fitz, and I was on the road. Very on brand for the Kansas Jayhawks. Great crowd this weekend. The students are really showing out again this year, which is not a guaranteed on a year-to-year basis, but it's great to see. And then it felt like they rode momentum of that Thursday game where you feel like mentally maybe you lost this game, and then all of a sudden you win it. Maybe they didn't have that feeling in the dugout, but I know that I did. And then all of a sudden you're pouring it on offensively. And the bullpen is still, I think, a little bit of a work in progress. I don't know if they have the rotation completely solved yet. That's something that Fitz keeps alluding to, is this Eastern BYU struggle of how do you manage those 2 weeks when you have to go Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and that's exactly what they had to do this weekend. But I like Matisse Nayrol, not Mathis. I sound like an idiot saying Mathis because he's French. Matisse Nayrol. Bodie Ray has eaten a few good innings on Fridays in his 2 starts. And then Don Bagley's looked pretty good on Sunday too in his new role. He got shaken up on Sunday this weekend. I think he gave up 7 runs, but most of those were late in his start. So if you take him out an inning earlier, hindsight's 2020, but he looks a lot better statistically. But then you got Tyson LeBlanc, who has just found a way to come up time and time again, but only in the second half of games. He's only hitting, I think, like 295, but it feels like after the fifth inning, he's more like 500. That's not stat based at all, but the guy just has a clutch gene right now that you can't really deny. And that's exactly what Kansas relied on last year was with other guys not named Tyson LeBlanc because Tyson was not at Kansas. And that's really what's tremendous about Dan Fitzgerald's program is that none of these guys were at Kansas last year for the most part. Brady Ballinger, Dariel Osorio offensively, and that's about it in that lineup. And then you've got 7, 8, 9 other guys who cycle in and out that might as well have been there last year because they look the same as they did last year. My only concern, and you didn't ask for my concern, is the schedule has not been that strong in Big 12 play. You did beat Cincinnati, which looked like a really good win, but Cincinnati struggled again this weekend. You should beat Houston. You should beat Utah. We're going to learn a lot about the Jayhawks and they host UCF this weekend.
Tyson LeBlanc, 8 of 12 this weekend with 7 RBIs, 3 doubles, and obviously the walk-off home run on Thursday night. Big 12 Player of the Week. Earned honors for sure. Look, I mean, so it's 27 new faces on the roster this year. Okay. I remember that from doing my Kansas preview. And when you have turnover like this, and it's one of the questions that I asked Fitz a month ago was, what does it take to kind of carry that thread through of culture from year over year when you have so much turnover? And he said, sometimes it just takes a little time for leaders to kind of step up. You mentioned it just now. Some of the guys that were pretty vocal on last year's team aren't here anymore. And so I think the wins that we've seen from Kansas over the last 3 weekends of Big 12 play are a credit to some of those guys maybe stepping up into off the field leadership roles a little bit more, things that we don't necessarily see from the start to the end of the game. And they're starting to kind of just connect a little bit more. We're seeing that at a couple different spots around the league. When we talk to TCU, I'm going to want to stop down and talk about that a little bit as well, because I think a similar situation is happening there too, where it's just guys are getting to know each other. Guys are starting to trust each other. Guys are starting to buy in a little bit more than maybe they were at the beginning of the season. And that, as much as the talent on the field, is driving the results at this point.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what's happening. After the game, Tyson LeBlanc told reporters that he had told Cade Baldridge, who's the runner on first base, he said, "I'm going to hit a double and you're going to score." It was just that kind of level of confidence, and then also that level of, okay, all right, I'll score on this. And he actually did not have to run very hard because it was a home run. But for a minute there, it looked like it might be a double against the wall. But he kind of did a Nelson Cruz type thing where he leaned up against the wall and all of a sudden it was a home run. Had to work that in because that is what it looked like. But I like the trend there because we didn't really have to see it much last year. They meshed right away and they made noise right away in the season. This one required a little bit more work, but they've won three Big 12 series in a row for the first time since 2014, and it's their best conference start ever according to the numbers.
Well, we know that the numbers never lie,
of course.
So, what do the numbers tell you about Utah right now? Because this is an offense that clearly still has it, very capable of putting up runs. They put them up in droves, but it's really hard to win games 15-14 when you've got a pitching staff that can't quite put it all together. I'm looking at the Thursday this line score right now, and you were close. There were no runs scored in the 6th inning.
Okay,
but other than that, there was a run scored in every inning, and it was at least 2 runs in every inning, which drags out a game a little bit. And when you don't have the bullpen arms to get through a scoreless 9th and just come away with the win, well, in that 9th inning, how many arms did Utah use? Let's see.
I'm gonna get they used 2 or 3.
They started with one.
I know
arm.
One of them is Ian, however you say his name, Linus.
Yes. So they used 3. They started with Seth Graham Pippen, then they went to Ian Linnaeus, and then they finished with Dylan Gazaway. And so instead of Graham Pippen working through the 9th, getting the save, and moving on to the next day, you used 2 more arms on Thursday night in high leverage situations where now those guys maybe aren't able to go on Friday. I mean, let's see here. I mean, they didn't throw that many pitches, but still, like you're calling guys out of the bullpen on a night where maybe you weren't expecting to call guys out of the bullpen, and that's happening for Utah at least once a weekend at this point. So Coulter McAnally didn't have his best stuff at the beginning of the day. That starts this kind of domino effect, and yet you still had a chance, really, to just sit down on it and close it out, and you couldn't quite do it. And that's got to be frustrating if you're a Utes fan.
No. It was kind of an ironic scene. Coulter went so late into the game where you thought, oh man, they're really hitting off this guy. When are they going to take Coulter out? And you and I both know how good he can be. But the KU offense was on early, and then we know the narrative and what you asked what the numbers say. The numbers say that bullpen is usually where things fall apart for the Utes. But the bullpen was actually strong for a couple innings. I think if you look at that line score that you maybe closed out of, maybe you didn't, there were at least 2 zeros put up by that Utah bullpen,
Yeah.
if I'm remembering correctly. So you thought, man, these guys hit off of Coulter McAnally, but they can't hit off the Utah bullpen. What happened here? And then all of a sudden, the KU offense decided that they were going to just score all their runs in the bottom of the ninth inning, which is probably the best time to score all your runs. But that is the narrative for Utah right now. And it's not just the numbers. The fans are frustrated with that aspect as well. I know that there were a few in my mentions who were just saying, oh, it's like this every weekend. This is the least surprising thing because everybody's freaking out about Kansas. How do you score 4 runs in the ninth inning? Amazing. And Utah fans are saying, I could have told you that was coming. And that's just kind of what it is right now for Utah.
That's a bummer. And yeah, so going back into the box score here, Ian Culver did have 1 2/3 innings of shutout. Baseball, Landon Salveson had 2/3 of an inning of work with the strikeout. Yeah, so I mean, those guys in limited action, Ian Culver and Landon Salveson did you a solid. They were a good bridge to your late inning arms, and then things obviously broke down there in the bottom of the ninth. At this point, though, Utah is pretty clearly a different team on the road than they are at home. So I'm curious to see if when they get back to Salt Lake City again. I don't know. I mean, it seems like they really love playing the new ballpark. We talked at the beginning of the season about, hey, they really just need to put 2 or 3 more wins over the course of the Big 12 on paper to really make what we would consider a marked improvement. And I still think they're kind of on pace for that. I mean, they're still right now in the mix to make the Big 12 playoffs. Let me go to my standings page here. They're in 10th. I mean, they're in a 4-way tie for 8th right now at 5-7 in Big 12 play. So it's not like they've fallen off a cliff. It's not like they're Arizona at this point, right? And you get back home, you take another series, all of a sudden you're looking at 7 or 8 Big 12 wins, and you're only halfway through conference play. And last season, I believe they only had 8 conference wins the entirety of conference play. So I understand the frustration from the Utes, and yes, I would love to see the bullpen be able to lock down a little bit more. Would love to see Coulter McAnally have some cleaner outings to start series off right. And yet, just the record by itself tells you that things are improving pretty dramatically for the Utes this season compared to last.
I 100% agree, and that offense really is good. It's one that can keep them in a lot of games. It's not a miracle that has to be done with the pitching side of things, but it's got to improve a little bit. It feels a lot like Texas Tech in some regards, where they've just got to tighten a few screws, and this Utah team can hit their potential, which isn't national championship level potential, but it's marketable improvement compared to where this program has been, and they're scrappier than they once were.
And I mean, yeah, if from last year to this year the improvement is, hey, we're going to make the Big 12 tournament this year, I think that's a reasonable and achievable goal that you can set for yourself if you're Utah. And I think that's something to be proud of, and that's something to work toward, because you're not going to eat the whole elephant in one season when maybe the investment hasn't quite been there for baseball like it has been for football, like it has been for other sports up there, or compared to the rest of the league in baseball. So, I think making the tournament, making a little bit more noise weekend to weekend is the perfect place for Utah to be. It builds up the middle of the Big 12, which I think has been maybe one of the weaker points of the league in recent years. Is okay, well, yeah, they've got 6, maybe 7 really quality teams, but that bottom half is not great. Okay, well, now if you've got the Utes, if you've got BYU, I mean, heck, Houston won a road weekend this weekend, which we'll get into in a little bit. If you think that every team can get you at one point or another, I think the whole conference get stronger. And so from a league perspective, I think Utah's doing a great job for the Big 12 right now, just because they're more competitive than they have been.
Absolutely, and there's a fire in that dugout. They were chirping all game with Kansas. I was field level for a little bit of that, and there's a lot of action in that dugout, and you don't necessarily expect that from the Utah program last few years. But those guys believe that they can win, and you know what? If they can press the right buttons with that pitching staff, they absolutely can win games, and they nearly did win Game 1 in Lawrence, and that gave a lot of momentum to the other dugout. Who knows what things might look like if they do, the Utes, win Game 1 there.
Who knows, right? I mean, it could have totally flipped things on its ear, and we'd be sitting here talking about, Kansas on the panic meter or something like that. But
Game 2 is at 11 a.m. the next day with rain, so that's a very quick turnaround. Who knows?
yeah, you just don't know. You just don't know. But yeah, I think the Utes are fine despite the sweep. We'll see what they look like when they get back home here. I believe this weekend.
I think they're at ASU.
Oh, they're at ASU, and
which
then
is
they go home. But hey, just make it through this tough stretch and get a couple on the back end of it. You still have a fun rivalry weekend with BYU coming up as well, which Lord knows what those games are going to look like. I'm very excited about that. But you mentioned the pitching staff, and if they can just put it together a little bit, being more capable of winning some of these weekend series, we're seeing that with the Baylor Bears over the last couple of weekends, right? Lucas Davenport being back and healthy and being the front end starter, I guess the Thursday night starter this week against BYU. And then Ethan Calder on the back end on Sundays to kind of close things out as the veteran presence. They go in, they host BYU this weekend. They take 2 of 3 from the Cougars. And all of a sudden they're sitting there at 7-5 in the Big 12. And I believe a 3-way tie for 4th with Arizona State and TCU. And we talked about it last week. Hey, if there's just a little bit more they can do to kind of take care of business with regularity, then they're gonna find themselves in the mix. And here they are, almost at the midpoint of Big 12 play, squarely in the mix.
I'm going to say 2 contradicting statements about Baylor. Number one, don't count them out of the Big 12 race. They're right in the mix. Like you just said, they're not too far behind. They have the schedule to absolutely make up ground, which I'll kind of get to in a second. But on the other hand, they need to get more from the rest of their lineup. It feels like a 1-2-3 situation right now with Tice Armstrong and then Brady Janusek and then the veteran Travis Sanders. Outside of that, a little to be asked for. You get flashes here and there. You see the pieces with the catcher Connect, and then there's somebody else who came up big a few times this weekend. His name's escaping me. But when I see Baylor in 2 weeks next to you, Jamie, in Waco, we'll be a lot more familiar with Baylor. We're going to coach them up right. Mitch might need us a little bit. We'll whip them into shape. Maybe not too much against your Horned Frogs, but we'll see what we can do. But I think that the presence of Ethan Calder on Sunday, it feels like he's slid into that role. Maybe that's the narrative of this league is the Big 12 is really good on Sundays. That's how we stand out in terms of the other conferences where you watch the SEC or the ACC on a Sunday and it's the 1st to 15. On the flip side, that's kind of been the case for Fridays in the Big 12. A little bit of a strange situation, just something to keep tabs on. But Calder on Sunday has been really, really good. And then, like you said, getting Davenport back on Friday, not just having him there to start games, but also being able to go later into games coming off that weird injury situation he had. They're a fun group, and it's kind of the same thing with Kansas for me. It's you beat the teams that I picked you to beat. I want to see you beat teams that maybe I'm not going to pick you to beat. And they absolutely have those opportunities coming up. I had their schedule pulled up just a second ago. They've got let me see where we're at here. They've got they just took care. No, they have Cincinnati on the road, and then you host TCU where we will be in attendance, Jamie. Then you have Arizona on the road, which at this point looks winnable. You host Kansas, Utah on the road, and then Kansas State. Although I think that's wrong. My list might be wrong on that. But either way, that was mostly right. They do end the season in Utah, if I remember correctly. So there's winnable series there, but then there's also some scary opponents ahead for the Bears, and they have every opportunity to make up ground. They also have every opportunity to bury themselves a little bit, and that's the product of being a developmental program that's maybe not supposed to be winning as much as they have the potential to right now.
Yeah, I know that Enzo Infelice is your Big 12 Freshman of the Year, and I don't think you're moving off of your stock there at this point. But yeah, Brady Janusek is starting to grow on me for that award at the end of the season. He went 5 of 13 this weekend with 7 RBIs, a double, and 2 home runs. He had a 4 of 6 day with 5 RBIs on Thursday to help the Bears get the win. He's played really solid defense out there in right field. And realistically, I mean, he's been one of the most consistent freshmen since the start of the season for any Big 12 team. And, I mean, I've started just referring to him, Travis Sanders, and Tice Armstrong as the big three for Baylor because they kind of are standing out in that lineup. They're doing most of the work there. But realistically, I mean, even, Sanders was 4 of 9 all weekend, and Tice Armstrong was 3 of 11. If you don't have Brady Janusek doing what he's doing, I don't know that Baylor wins that series. And so for a freshman to kind of be carrying the load on a smaller scale, it reminds me a little bit of what Stroh was doing for TCU last year, just because so much of the production at some points of the season for TCU had to run through Sawyer. A lot of Baylor's production seems like it has to be generated by Brady Janusek, and then that starts to spark things for the rest of the baseball team. And I also want to say, just on a complete side note, Travis Sanders is playing some really good defense at shortstop for Baylor. I saw 3 or 4 SportsCenter worthy clips from him this weekend, including a bare hand on a ball over the middle, a slow roller, and then he went deep into the hole for one and made a great throw. That is not normal for a guy that has not typically played that position in his career. He makes the move from second base over to shortstop and just has turned into a really stout defensive player over there. Travis Sanders, like you said at the beginning of the year, the straw that stirs the drink for this team, the guy that it's all built around, and he is setting the example both at the plate and in the field for Baylor's entire baseball team at this point.
That's the Tyreek Kemp school of hard knocks and great defense down in Waco, and that's what this program's all about. That's the way Mitch Thompson wants to build it. Is Sanders was playing second base last season, so it wasn't like he sat behind Tyreek Kemp and learned shortstop that way, but it's guys teaching other guys how to play Baylor baseball, and eventually that builds a good program. And we've seen Brady Janusek make immediate waves. You hope he sticks around that program, just the way that college sports works today. Hopefully he can do that and be the next Travis Sanders for this program, creating other Brady Januseks along the way. And that's just simply how much Thompson wants to win at Baylor, and you hope he can get it done. We identified this year as kind of the big building block, not necessarily the final one in terms of winning like he will at Baylor in our eyes, but it's promising. And I think that they're ahead of schedule at this point.
I would agree with that. Still, like you said, need to see a little bit more to take that next step. But this year, I think they're perfectly on track with who they've got and what they're doing right now. Will be very fun to see them kind of take on some harder challenges over the next month of the Big 12 schedule. On the flip side, BYU, I think they're in an extremely similar boat to Utah, which I'm sure BYU and Utah fans love to hear, that they're having kind of mirror image seasons, but this is a different team on the road than it is in Provo. They still have not quite figured out their pitching staff at all. I'm a little confused because Garrison Sumner, who has been pretty steady for them on the mound in a starter role, did not start. I don't know if they were going to an opener kind of situation here or something like that, but he came in the 3rd inning instead of starting the game, I believe on Thursday. Nate Gray looked great, though. He went 6 2/3 in BYU's win. And Ashton, oh my God. Ashton Johnson. Thank you. Wow. Ashton Johnson, kind of the tough luck loser in that 3rd game because Ethan Calder was just, striking out 9 guys over 6 innings and being virtually unhittable. Johnson went 5 1/3, gave up 3, and ended up having to take the loss in that game. So 2.5 arms for BYU have been pretty steady. Just got to figure out the roles that they're going to be in consistently, I think. And frankly, if you rolled out there next weekend as BYU with a Garrison Sumner, Nate Gray, Ashton Johnson starting rotation, I wouldn't hate it. I certainly wouldn't hate it. I mean, they're going to give you length. They're going to give you an opportunity to win ball games late. And realistically, that sets up this offense pretty nicely most days to be able to go out and do some damage.
This was the second quality start in a row for Nate Gray. That's the second time he's been mentioned on the Flyover League. Ashton Johnson feels like the ultimate weapon for BYU, and it's always interesting how they end up using him. And then, like you said, the weird opener situation, who knows what they're experimenting with on the mound. But BYU had a lot of opportunities to win the series. They took, I believe it was game 2 of the series, and then they were competitive in the other games. But like you said, just some tough luck. Baylor kind of had to have this one in my eyes, and BYU in terms of reaching their goals maybe didn't. That's the goal is you take one on the road, you win two at home. That's what happened here. Not much more to say about that. That's just how BYU is living right now, and both them and Utah get them at home, and man, those guys are the Monstars. But on the road, they are whatever you call the aliens when they're not super powered up.
I can't remember, but you know what just pops into my head? I would love to see BYU and Utah run a weekend series, kind of like um, North Carolina and ECU do,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
where it's the home and home and the neutral site. I
yeah.
think that'd be
Go play
very
Utah
fun.
Valley. Yeah,
There you go. That'd
that'd
be
be
kind of
fun.
fun.
As long
Anywho,
as we're talking schedule, I'm going to interrupt and save myself a little bit. The Baylor schedule, I said, go ahead and disregard it. Completely made up. Very, very wrong. They do not play Kansas. They don't play another. They don't play Arizona. So I'm not even going to try. I'm just going to take my lumps and say, go figure it out yourself. But never listen to me when it comes to a schedule. I just completely made that up.
well, I was convinced, completely convinced that that's who they were playing this weekend. They are at Cincinnati this weekend.
Yeah,
So
I got that. I got that one right.
okay, you did get that one right. You did get that
Yeah.
one right, and that transitions us nicely into Cincinnati and Oklahoma State because the Bearcats are in a bad way right now. We're going to start with them, and then we'll get to Oklahoma State, who I think has been really impressive over the last couple of weekends. But Cincinnati is now 4-8 in Big 12 play. They lost at home last weekend to Kansas. They got swept on the road this weekend at Oklahoma State. The pitching isn't working. The lineup top to bottom isn't working. Quentin Coates has been extraordinarily quiet the last two weekends. When we think about panic meter and Cincinnati, where are you at right now with the Bearcats?
If we're going to go out of 10, it feels like you have to respond to Cincinnati the way that they show you who they are, where it's very, here's my panic meter. And right now it's probably about a 7.5, because we know what the Cincinnati team can look like when they're really good. And when they are really good, they look really good and they can hit the ball really well. Quentin Coates leads the way. I don't know if he's the nation's home run leader anymore because it's very feast or famine with him at this point. The whole lineup kind of supports him with their small ball approach. Everybody gets on. Quentin Coates drives them in, or somebody else does. And then Nate Taylor goes 7 innings and strikes out 11 guys. And then the bullpen was hit or miss at certain times, but when they're good, they're on. So when they're playing A+ baseball, as it turns out, they do play really, really good baseball. But they have not looked apart for the last 2 weekends. And you thought, okay, you come out and play competitive against Oklahoma State, you lose on the road, and then we'll just go ahead and get the next two. And then they just kind of vanished. And it's not Cincinnati that we're used to, where these guys are tough to put away. They score a million runs. They can come out of nowhere and score 10 runs in an inning. I don't know if they don't have an identity right now that feels like an overreach in assessing it that way, but it felt like Oklahoma State was more susceptible to the kind of 20-19 final that Cincinnati has generally liked to play with, and the Cincinnati Bats managed to disappear against an Oklahoma State pitching staff that it has great potential, but is a little bit patchwork right now. I'm very concerned about Cincinnati, but I'm still reserved at 7.5 because I know that the potential is there for these guys to get out of the hole and they can win out theoretically. They can win every series the rest of the way. It doesn't feel like they're beyond repair like maybe some other teams in this league, like maybe in Arizona. But geez, I don't know what to make of them, and that's really bad for me when it comes to timing my picks in the pick'em because I'm so far behind. I can't be messing around with your Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah, well, I got my ass whipped in pick'em this week as well, so don't worry about that. The model had a bad week. The model had a bad week, and I went against the model to pick Kansas State over TCU and got my ass kicked there. So you know what? You can't win for trying. With Cincinnati, I don't know, because I start to think back to the way that they had their non-conference schedule set up and the struggles that they had early on in the year. We didn't know at that point if it was, man, they've been in Alabama for like 5 weeks. Maybe we should cut them some slack. Or, once they get home, we'll see how they do. And they did really well once they got home. They were hitting the ball much better. And then the home effort kind of faded against Kansas, which was the biggest surprise to me in the midst of all of this. I'm a little concerned about Quentin Coates at this point because the ball was absolutely flying out at O'Brate this weekend. Oklahoma State had no qualms with hitting home runs, hitting the ball into the gap. Like they were hammering the baseball. Cincinnati just couldn't keep up, and Coates, I believe, for the second straight weekend, only had 2 hits. So I don't know what's going on there. If it's mental, if it's mechanical, what's going on? But they really need. I know Bishop Ball is its own special brand of baseball, but they really need Quentin Coates. Like to an extent, they are built around him in this lineup. And small ball will only get you so far in a league where teams are regularly scoring 8, 9, 10 runs. So, especially, I mean, when you don't have the bullpen to support small ball, you've got to figure something else out. Quentin Coates maybe was kind of the mask to some of these issues early on in Big 12 play. But you got to hope. I mean, I hope he starts swinging the bat again because, oh my God, the boogeyman of baseball, when he is on fire, it is so fun to see. But this is a different Cincinnati baseball team when Quentin Coates isn't hitting, and that's just where they are right now.
You didn't think it would be that way with a home run dependent player. That's not. I don't think of that when I think of Cincinnati. I think 3 singles and you score 2 runs because everybody's so fast. So it just feels like I said, I don't want to make the assumption that they lack an identity right now, but Bishop Ball and what they're playing right now are not the same. And you hope that they can turn it around because, like I said, when they're on their game, they can really beat anybody in the country. These guys beat Auburn and quite handily in a midweek, but still it happened. I would be very interested to see how they do the next few weeks because, like I said, above all, I need to figure out how I value these guys in the pick'em, and that's what really matters here.
Yes, exactly. We can't let the other people in pick'em beat us.
And
although I think we're in third and fourth at this point. So
yeah, I just want to finish in third.
Oh, well, you might because I had a terrible weekend. On the other side of things, Oklahoma State had a great weekend. They win 3 games in a row. Colin Brueggemann starting to swing the bat really, really well. He has 5 home runs in Oklahoma State's last 4 games. He had 12 RBIs, 2 multi-home run games last week for the Cowboys. Was one of those guys who obviously, I believe Tyson LeBlanc earned Big 12 Player of the Week honors. Colin Brueggemann probably also earned Big 12 Player of the Week honors. I would not have minded to have seen a co situation happening there because of the way Brueggemann swung the bat. But the reality is everybody swung the bat for Oklahoma State. They had 9 home runs in 3 games against Cincinnati. I mean, they were on fire. Colin Ritchie hit number 18. They could do no wrong. Mario Pesca, though, this guy is a dude. He's an absolute monster. He goes 6 innings. I don't even remember how many he struck out. It's like 8 or 9.
I think it was 8.
The only reason he comes out of the ball game is because when he goes out to warm up in the 7th inning, the umpire notices something on his hand, stops the warm up, goes out to look at it, and it's blood on his throwing hand because he's got a blister on his middle finger, and he does not want to come out of the game. The medical staff for Oklahoma State had to told you cannot continue to pitch with your finger this way. He was just going to ride it out, man. And I don't know when the shot that they showed on camera, it did not look like it was a new development. Like that thing had been there for a moment, and he's just out there dealing with this big bloody blister on his finger, and he's laying down this Cincinnati lineup like it's really no big deal. So Mario Pesca gets my Dude of the Week award, which is brand new, and I just started it right now, basically for him because I was wildly impressed. And then the rest of Oklahoma State's pitching staff looked really solid as well. Ethan Lund is settling into that Friday role. They did this really interesting kind of just bullpen game situation on Saturday, Sunday, whichever day their series ended. That worked out splendidly. But yeah, it seems like Oklahoma State's starting to catch a little wind in their sails.
Yeah, they're kind of like the reverse Cincinnati for me is that they seem to be trending in different directions. So I think it's kind of perfect where, all right, Cincinnati looks really good. Okay, Oklahoma State actually looks really good now. And it can't be both. So it's appropriate that they played this weekend. And they did play on Sunday. So it was one of those where there weren't many games to watch. So I think a lot of people tuned into this one. I do have a little bit of a take for you. TP Wentworth, I don't know what awards he might be eligible for. I don't know where he might fall when it comes to the all Big 12 teams, first, second, honorable mention, whatever that looks like. But it feels like he's not just the biggest X factor in the Oklahoma State lineup, but maybe the biggest X factor in the Big 12 when he's on. This whole team is on. And I can't articulate it much more than that. I'm sure you have all kinds of crazy stats on base 12. Free shout out. But he feels like a total X factor for that group. And just the, not to steal your phrase, the straw that stirs the drink for the Pokes. And I didn't see that coming for the Clemson transfer two-way player who showed flashes at Clemson, but wasn't exactly a prize for a recruit. It was like, okay, well, I guess we'll take this guy. But very similar to Connor Schaus at Texas Tech to line a parallel down to Lubbock, where these two guys, two-way players from the ACC, come in and make massive impacts on their team. And not so much in the pitching department, but really, really strong offensively. TP Wentworth, and then every time he does something, they tweet 877 runs now. It's so marketable. It's perfect. And I just want TP Wentworth to get his shine because he continues to be very consistent. And then when he's on, he is on. And he's just a really fun player to watch.
He is. And you're right. He's been great for them this year. The pitching has come along the last few outings. I think he went 4 innings against DBU was his last time out on the mound this past midweek. Getting him in that role, I think, is perfect for just getting him reps on the mound. But he's made 7 appearances and has looked pretty good for them. And then, yeah, he's got an OPS over 1. I mean, it's 690 slugging with 8 home runs, 406 on base, which is not bad for a guy that's more of a power hitter from the left side. The strikeout to walk ratio is a little brutal with 30 strikeouts to just 8 walks. But hey, when you're hitting 8 home runs and you're still getting on base 4 out of every 10 times, you'll take that every day of the week if you're him. And so, yeah, he's definitely been one of those guys that has added so much depth to this Oklahoma State offense that maybe, they were struggling to find with some of the guys that they lost last offseason. He's been a wonderful addition. And I mean, he's only a sophomore, right? Like that last year at Clemson was just his freshman year. So they definitely saw something in him in the limited time he had with Clemson that thought, hey, maybe this guy can not only be a contributor in 2026, but we've got another year before the draft or 2 years of eligibility left for this kid after this year. TP Wentworth could really kind of carve his name into Oklahoma State lore here a little bit if he continues this for the next couple seasons.
And he's got that marketable 877 runs now. It's hard to miss on Twitter. They do the GAT band thing that gets not shoved down your throat in a bad way, but shoved down your throat in a good way. When Oklahoma State's hitting the ball, like you said, it flies out of the ballpark. And TP got in on that mix. Had 3 hits on Saturday against Cincinnati, and good for him. Like I said, X Factor material right there. And I don't know what kind of awards they give for that. He's probably going to work his way onto some sort of Big 12 team, whether it's first or second. But there's got to be something else that somebody should hand him. You gave Super Mario the dude of the week. There's got to be something for TP, the X Factor of the week, the whatever you want to call it. We'll workshop it.
Yeah. The thing that's popping into my head right now is X gonna give it to you. If he's gonna be the X Factor, we'll call him. But we'll, like you said, we're gonna workshop that. Speaking of needing some workshopping, let's talk about Texas Tech baseball. This is a team that has now gone 1-5 in its last 2 weekends after going 4-2 in its first 2 weekends of Big 12 play. Getting swept in Fort Worth against TCU, understandable. You don't want it to happen if you're a Red Raider. You don't like that it's happening if you're a Red Raider, but you can at least comprehend it, understand it. Going back to the Rip this weekend, losing 2 of 3 to Houston, who hasn't beaten you in Lubbock since 1996. That's a little bit of a different pill to swallow if you're the Red Raiders at this point. The pitching wasn't awful, wasn't great. The hitting was hit or miss at times. Defensively, they struggled. And I don't know if you caught this at the end of the first game of the series, Noah. The way this game ended, Jesse Rusnick was doubled off of first base on a fly ball to left field after Tech had worked its way back into a manageable situation in the bottom of the 9th. End up losing that game 8-6. End up losing the next game as well before salvaging the weekend with a win in the 3rd game of the series. Texas Tech is not in a good way right now. It's a bummer to see because I think they've got a lot of individual talent, but it just doesn't strike me that they've been able to kind of figure out that puzzle.
And they showed flashes at the beginning of conference play. Like you said, started 4-2 with wins over Kansas and Arizona. And Arizona is what Arizona is at this point. But either way, those are two of the bigger conference series wins that you can pick up in the Big 12. And then TCU broke them. And I'm sure friend of the program, potentially Ray Cartwright, will run cartwheels at that phrase of TCU breaking Texas Tech baseball. But Houston Baylor last week felt like not an elimination series, but it felt like whoever loses this one's going to be in bad shape. And then you send the loser of that one, Houston, to Texas Tech, and you think, all right, Texas Tech gets right, and then Houston's kind of dead in the water. This was the ultimate call an ambulance, but not for me situation for Houston, who maybe has a little bit of life again, at least in terms of reaching their goals this season. Like we said, speculation that maybe some changes were coming to Houston, whatever that looked like, and all of a sudden these guys have figured it out against Texas Tech, who of course has problems of their own. And at this point, when I don't even know how to describe it. It was just so strange the way that this Texas Tech team has played so up and down, where you get them, like I said, early in Big 12 play, and then they fall apart. I'm at a loss for words here. I don't know how to string a sentence together when it comes to Texas Tech baseball, because it wasn't that long ago that they were playing in the College World Series, and now you're just kind of lost as a program right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to pile on too much here, but they've just too many mental mistakes, too many physical errors, and Tim Tadlock is not a guy that suffers fools in that regard. So I wouldn't be shocked to see some kind of defensive alignment changes in upcoming weekends, just as he starts to maybe experiment with guys that are going to be able to get them more outs more consistently. Because it's one thing to be an offensive minded ball club that can win games with the bats when they really need to, and make up for some of that pitching that isn't there for them. But when you aren't pitching and you're not playing good defense, then that's just, there's not much that the offense is going to be able to do to help you recover from that. So would not be surprised to see him tweak that defensive alignment a little bit. Maybe, Lincoln Garcia's looked great at shortstop. Maybe there's another guy that can supplement you there while he moves over to third base. Connor Schaus has struggled pretty hard over there at third base. Been great on the mound for them in limited time. So maybe there's an opportunity to get one of your more effective arms a little bit more run. Yeah, just a lot of moving parts and a lot of challenges for Tadlock and that coaching staff this year. That I don't know that those things are necessarily as easy to resolve as some of the other issues we've talked about with some of these other ball clubs. But Houston, hey, all of a sudden, 3-9 in Big 12 play is not great, not good even, actually pretty bad, but one game out of 12th place in the Big 12 standings. So, you're right there when it comes to, hey, maybe we can work our way back into the Big 12 tournament. We know what we saw from this team early on in non-conference. Like, they're capable of putting pretty good wins together. They did that in Lubbock this weekend. They got Richie Roman back. He had missed a month with an oblique injury. I did a little digging on that one and found that out. Threw 2 scoreless innings to help them win that second game, 13-10 in extras. Cade Clemmy got back in the lineup this weekend. We've kind of seen him as an enigma. Not sure exactly what's going on there. Trey Broussard looks completely healthy. He was dealing with a hamstring injury, which is why he was DHing so much. That has moved Blake Fields over to left, who's been really good defensively there. And they played with the rotation again a little bit. I thought it worked out well for them this weekend against a really good offensive ball club in their home park. Maybe Todd Whitting and the staff have found a little bit of that juice that powered them early on this year.
Yeah, there's that flare. Blake Fields looks a little bit better, and then Trey Broussard, you mentioned, hit the ball well in his DH role nearly here for the cycle on Friday or Saturday. I get so confused with the series this last weekend, and we can go down that rabbit hole some other time. But Richie Roman back on the mound. You mentioned his return from injury. Chris Skinta has or Cinta, whichever, another pronunciation situation. Solid bullpen relief. Their grit. They had to come back a little bit in this series against Texas Tech, and this is a team who, like we touched on, was kind of on the edge of maybe being pronounced dead, but then you're facing a late deficit, and what does that say about a team when you're not giving up and then you end up coming back to win that game in extra innings. They have a little bit more identity than some of the other teams in this league right now, where there's that fight. They can hit the ball late in the game. Can they pitch? Don't ask, don't tell. But they're scrappy. They're not fun, but they're scrappy. But they were once fun, and I would like to see them get back to that fun that we saw early on in the year at Puerto Rico and some of the other non-conference wins that they picked up.
I think health matters a lot for vibes, right? When you know that you're down guys and guys that are important, like Roman's an important arm for them. And when he's not throwing for an entire month, that can, not excuse the way that they've been losing ball games, but you can start to make some sense of it at the very least. And guys feel that in the dugout when they know that some of their real dudes aren't going to be able to be out there and be with them in the middle of the fight. And so maybe getting some of these guys back right has been a boost for them, and hopefully they can kind of carry that forward from Lubbock. Because realistically, I was not expecting them to be very competitive this weekend against Texas Tech. Obviously, I was dead wrong in that assessment, and that's great to see. Like, it's great to see a team get knocked on its backside, get up, and still have a little fight left. And so that was really cool. Cool to see from the Cougs this weekend. Okay, let's keep moving because we've talked about UCF and their road win over West Virginia. We've talked about Houston now and their road series win over Texas Tech. There were two more, and we've saved them for the last two conversations here. Texas Tech goes up to Manhattan, Kansas, a place that historically has not been very kind to them, and they take 2 of 3 from Kansas State in the gentleman's kind of way, giving Kansas State that first game almost literally.
Yeah.
With the walk-off D. Kennedy sacrifice fly on Friday night before taking Saturday 9-3, Sunday 4-0. TCU found some pitching all of a sudden, and they look like the competitive team, the championship caliber team that we expected them to be all year.
How about Zach James going, I think it was 8 innings, obviously shutout in that 5-0 win. A little bit robbed that I couldn't make 4-0. A little bit robbed I couldn't make it down to Manhattan on Sunday to see that pitching performance, but also I'm glad I didn't drive 3 hours to see the K-State offense get blanked because that's kind of the main show in town right now. And it says a lot when a TCU pitching staff that has been a little bit broken in terms of replacing Tommy Laporte's production and what that rotation looks like. Obviously, you're a lot closer to that situation than I am, but from the outsider situation, it felt like that they were very clearly missing a piece and almost a half, just in terms of Tommy Laporte's presence, in terms of going into games and how the bullpen managed to piece that together. But when that group comes together and shuts down Kansas State's offense, which had been their calling card, where they had struggled to pitch, it says a lot about where TCU's at. And you had mentioned with Kansas and how they were coming together in the dugout. I'm more interested in hearing more things about how TCU is performing in that regard. But that Friday or Friday, it was a Friday night game. That Friday one was very fun. Micah Kendrick came up to bat, and you thought, oh man, this is picturesque. He's going to walk off TCU, the former Horned Frog himself, and they had a very lengthy pitching change, and so much went into it. You could tell it was very, very well known what was on the line, not just a loss, but also a signature moment for a former Frog. But I think he walked, and then D. Kennedy, the sac fly, drove in the game-winning run. But then the rebound from TCU, it says a lot about where that club's at, because I don't think that a month ago TCU wins this series. It's just they're moving in the right direction.
They are. I mean, you break it down this way. Kansas State scored 16 runs in the first 10 innings of the series and then didn't score another run in the last 17 innings of the series. You mentioned Zach James. He was stellar on Sunday, earned Big 12 Pitcher of the Week for his performance. But Lance Davis was great on Saturday as well. 6 2/3 did a great job of keeping the ball down. He has quietly become pretty steady for this ball club. He was the one win when they shut out UCF in that Saturday game a couple of weeks ago. And the redshirt freshman has really started to develop into a reliable arm. Fastball up to 97, good cutter, hard breaking slider. Like, he's got a really nice pitch mix, and he's starting to feel himself a little bit, which I think is great for this ball club. And that's where I think the similarities with Kansas begin is with the confidence that we're starting to see from some of the younger pitchers, right? Davis, like I just mentioned, is a redshirt freshman. Zach James is just a sophomore. You know, Mason Brassfield's just a sophomore. Nate Stern is just a sophomore. All these kids are pretty young, right? The oldest guy on the team is Cole Kramer, who they call Unk, and then Walt Quinn, who's married. And outside of them, it's a young bunch. So, you know, to see these guys get a little swagger, start chirping a little bit, which they weren't doing early on this year. Zach James actually got a warning coming off the mound after the 6th inning on Sunday for chirping a little bit. I believe it was at Micah Kendrick, who he was not teammates with at any point, but was feeling the vibe of the dugout, I suppose. And they're just starting to get some of their swagger back, and that can do so much for a team. There was a lot of conversation early on in the season about me versus we. That there was a lot of selfish conversation that kind of leaked into media availabilities at times. Haven't really heard that over the last couple weeks, and so maybe some of that got sorted out by some of the leadership in the dugout, and now they're starting to win some games and gain some confidence and starting to feel themselves. And I mean, TCU baseball is starting to look a lot more like TCU baseball these last 7 or 8 games. And I also want to say, Cole Kramer, I don't know what shifted for him, but at DVU in the midweek 2 weeks ago, he moved down from leadoff to the 2 hole in the lineup, and he moved defensively from second base to first base. Here is what he has done in those 8 games since then. He has gone on an 8-game hitting streak. He is hitting .475 with a .775 slugging percentage and a .523 on-base percentage. He has the highest OPS on the team over those 8 games, and TCU is 7-1. And when your leader, when one of your older veterans is starting to swing the bat like that, I think that's great for TCU. He's another guy who I thought could have been a candidate for Player of the Week this week. He had a couple home runs this week as well. Just hitting the cover off the ball right now. Gave a little shimmy when he hit a double on the Sunday game because he drove in 2 runs with 2 outs. It was a really great swing. Yeah, this is a team that's starting to get its swagger back at the end of the day, and I think that's really good for them, and maybe not so good for everybody else who was hoping they could take advantage of a down year for TCU.
I don't know if you feel this way about where TCU stands in the Big 12 as far as programs, not necessarily teams, but as a program. It feels a lot like Kansas basketball in years past, where okay, we're in first right now, but you know who's down there in like 4th or 5th is the Jayhawks, and we're not going to beat them maybe in this environment. When they come here, they kind of have our number. It just feels like the big bad, the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Kansas Jayhawks. You don't want TCU on your schedule moving forward, but you also don't want them collecting wins when you're not involved. It's a very weird dynamic. It feels like they're just lurking right now, and whether they stay down there or not, that is a team that people still get up for, and I think that matters as well. I don't know if you feel that at all. Curious what your perspective is on TCU kind of being the target on their back, whether they're playing up to that standard or not.
Yeah, I mean, year over year, I think that's true to an extent, especially since Texas and OU have left the league. And it doesn't help the target size when you're the unanimous preseason favorite to win the conference, right? So even if we're just looking at it in a vacuum of this season alone, TCU was far and away the favorite to win the conference by the voters, by the coaches in the league. And so you know that those guys have that weekend circled every time that TCU is either coming to town or they're heading to Fort Worth. But man, is it not great to be UCF right now? Because you've already got the series win on the road with a Sunday road win against TCU in your back pocket, and you just went on the road and got a Sunday win in your back pocket against West Virginia, and you're sitting top of the league right now. Rich Wallace probably not sweating in the middle of games right now because of how comfortable his team is in first place. Arizona State, even, I know they've hit some road bumps, but they got to win a series win. Get your licks in while you can. Arizona State and UCF both managed to do that. Now you've got West Virginia looking at that last weekend of the season up in Morgantown with the Frogs, like, oh, okay, they're building some steam. We've got to get back on track and build up some momentum as well. The Frogs have a pretty favorable schedule over the next few weekends. They come home this weekend against Arizona. Then they are I believe, on the road in Waco, which is where you and I will meet up and watch them play the Bears. Then I believe it's Houston, and then they go to Oklahoma State. So these next 3 weekends, I feel, just as someone who covers the team, these 3 weekends are pretty gettable for TCU. And if you're a Horned Frog fan, you're kind of licking your lips right now saying, okay, like, yeah, there was a slow start. We still got some questions. But if we can just run through these next 3 weeks, this will be a totally different look when we look up at the standings come the start of May.
Yeah. And West Virginia is not the only one sweating out that TCU series at the end of the year. I've looked at flights to Pittsburgh. I've looked at the dynamics. Almost impossible to get to Morgantown. I know you've said you've been there. It's definitely a bucket list. I don't know how you pull that off. Good for you. I think you might have a direct flight to Pittsburgh. I'll tell you, I don't. So
brutal.
maybe you do, maybe you don't. I don't know. But
yeah.
two flights, renting a car. I want to, but I don't know if I can.
Well, how about this? I'll fly up to Omaha because there is a direct flight from DFW to Omaha. You just hop in the passenger seat and we'll ride.
Okay.
We'll go.
Wow, you want to drive to? Okay. Yeah, maybe I'll stay back.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. We'll get you to Morgantown if we really need to get you to Morgantown. We'll figure out a way.
I would argue that we do need to do that, but I don't know when.
I don't know when. I don't know how, but we'll make it happen. Arizona State made it happen this weekend. Rivalry weekend on the road at High Corbett playing Arizona. I know Arizona's down, but like you've mentioned on the show previously, Arizona's still Arizona. They're still the brand. They're still the logo, right? And much like the Kansas Jayhawks in basketball, you don't care if they're down. You still want to get them. And for Arizona State, that's doubly true because of the rivalry. I know I said last week that I wouldn't be surprised if Arizona fought a little bit harder than we've seen them fight in this series, and that turned out to be true. I was still a little bit surprised by how much Arizona struggled at moments, or Arizona State struggled at moments with the Wildcats despite coming away with the 2-1 series win.
I agree. There were certain moments where I know I had texted you, Arizona has seemingly given up, and then Arizona would sit around and Arizona State would return the favor and say, actually, we would like you to hang around with us, Wildcats. It was a strange series in that regard. What stood out to me was Friday when Cole Carlone goes however long into the game, 6 innings, 7 innings, and he gets 11 or 12 strikeouts, career high. And then he hands it over the bullpen, and Arizona rattles off, I think it was a 6 or 7 run inning. And you say, okay, do you realize what you've just done, Arizona State? You just blew Carlone's best start of his career, and now you've given momentum to an Arizona Wildcat team that's really hungry for momentum and guys that have the talent to hang around in a series like this. And then on Saturday, ASU ended up taking care of business. Sometimes that offense is just too legit to quit. Landon Hairston, tremendous player. It might be time to paint his spikes golden, whether he would agree with that or not. Dominic Smaldino, big weekend. I've been a big fan of his ever since I accidentally stumbled on his Northwoods League stats this summer, and then he committed to Arizona State a few days later. Obviously, he'd be nowhere without me, but his big bat is so fun to watch in that ASU lineup, and his defense is coming along.
It is. So I wanted to call out this tweet I saw today from Colin Norkovicius. He's the video coordinator for Arizona State baseball. And he said, in this series win over Arizona this past weekend, Arizona State's pitching staff led the country in whiffs with a total of 78, highlighted by Cole Carlone, whose 33 whiffs was the most by a single pitcher all weekend. So Arizona fought. Carson McIntyre had a pretty good weekend for them. Tony Lira did Tony Lira things for them this weekend. And yet Arizona State's pitching still pretty much handled business. Because I was thinking, oh man, okay, Arizona fought harder than I thought they would. And then I saw this stat today and I was like, okay, well, they really just said, screw it. We're going to swing, and we're going to swing hard, and maybe we'll make some contact. But they swung and missed a tremendous amount as well. And that leads to what I was going to tell you. I didn't put it on the run sheet, but I was playing around with the Big 12 stats just on the Big 12 website today, which is always a dangerous thing to do because you never know if they're right. But I sorted by OPS because I just wanted to see. Tony Lira is the OPS leader for Arizona. Do you know where he ranks among all Big 12 hitters?
Mm.
I'll even tell you what the OPS is. It's 959.
Oh, okay. I would have guessed a little bit higher. Um, 15th.
42nd.
Jeez.
The next highest is 72nd for Arizona. This is a
Okay.
team that offensively is as anemic as it gets in the conference. And it's such a bummer because I still think, although the pitching didn't have its greatest weekend this weekend, Luke Flata got knocked around a little bit. Kramkowski earned his first win. Colin McKinney earned his first win. No, Kramkowski got a loss. Colin McKinney earned his first win. He's 1-5 now. But it's just all you needed the offense to be was like average. And I think this is a completely different season for Arizona. It just hasn't come together. Um, and yeah, we're still in that kind of danger zone of being a ball club that made it to Omaha last year that isn't going to make the Big 12 tournament this year. They're in dead last right now in 14th place. Yes, one game back of 12th, but like I just said, you're going to Fort Worth this weekend to face a very hot TCU ball club, and things, at least on paper, could be a Houston situation, but at least on paper, things look like they're going to go from bad to worse for Arizona right now.
And like you said, it's the logo. It's not going away. No matter what your record is, Team C Arizona, they see 2025 College World Series participant. They see 2025 Big 12 tournament champion over the TCU Horned Frogs in a great game that went deep into extras. That doesn't go away, and people aren't going to look over you the rest of the season. Maybe they will next year, but right now that's not going to happen. And that's a very real thing that Arizona has to continue to try to overcome because talent wise, they can absolutely turn it around. But we are running into mid April at this point. And at some point, it's way too much to overcome if it isn't already.
Fully agree. All right, let's very quickly pivot to look forward at the rest of the week ahead. Um, 11 midweek games on Tuesday and 3 more on Wednesday for the Big 12 this week. Which of those games really stands out to you?
Well, you mentioned earlier I'm intimate with the Kansas program, as you so politely put. They come to Nebraska, just about 45 minutes from my house, which is different than the middle of the night 3 hour trip I had to make for that Utah series. I'm excited for that one annually. I always like to give Fitz a little crap because 2 years ago they were supposed to come to Nebraska twice and they canceled it due to weather slash RPI slash whatever you want to call it. And now this matchup is not just a good one because it's near me, but it's a should be top 25 matchup, top 26, call it matchup with Nebraska, who's won, I think, 22 of their last 23 games. They've won 10 in a row, and then they're 15-0 at home. Now, this is a midweek. It's not a weekend series, so there's a little less juice, but Nebraska's throwing a good arm. Kansas throwing an arm that's very experienced in Cannon Carr. It's going to be a fun one. I'm excited to see what they look like. Because KU won this game last year in Lincoln, but then they lost to Nebraska in Lawrence last season. So this is turning into an annual midweek rivalry per se. Should be a good crowd, good weather. Love it. Love this matchup, and I love how Fitz continues to do me this great favor, strictly just for me, of scheduling Nebraska.
Well, look, it's great. Dust off whatever old Big 8 rivalry trophy they used to have
Right.
between those two football teams and haul that thing out for the annual baseball series now. I'd be down. Add a third game. Make it a midweek series, kind of like Houston and Sam Houston do, or some other schools across the country do. That'd be fun. That'd be absolutely fun. You're right. Nebraska's hot right now. Kansas is gaining momentum. That's going to be a very fun collision between those two teams. Interestingly enough, on Tuesday, of the 11 games, 9 of them are road games for the Big 12. I don't think I've ever seen a midweek schedule line up like this. Obviously, it's just coincidence, but you've got Texas Tech heading to New Mexico, Utah and Utah Tech, BYU at Utah Valley. Those are close by. Those make sense. TCU heading to Abilene Christian makes sense. It's about an hour and a half, hour 45 away from Fort Worth. Houston at Sam Houston as a part of their 3-game rivalry over the course of the season, and Arizona State at Grand Canyon. And then the only 2 home games are UCF hosting a very sneaky good Stetson ball club that's won 40 games the last 2 years. And where did it go? Oklahoma State hosting Oral Roberts, who was in the College World Series back in 2023. So very fun Tuesday midweek games. And then on Wednesday, you've got Arizona hosting New Mexico State, Arizona State hosting UNLV, and West Virginia hosting rival Marshall. That was supposed to be on Tuesday, got rescheduled to Wednesday due to, quote unquote, like you said, weather. So we'll see if that game happens or not.
The UCF Stetson one draws my eyes as well because Stetson has beat UCF already this season. And there was a weird exchange in my mentions where West Virginia fans during that Saturday game before the Mountaineers came back against UCF were saying, man, we're such frauds. We're the worst team in the country, things like that. And then UCF fans would say, man, we're frauds. We lost to Stetson. So it was this weird, we both suck, even though we're actually both really good. Commentary going on, and then they both kind of old takes expose each other. So yeah, I was right. We do suck. Neither of you suck, but I want to see UCF right the wrong against Stetson. So maybe that midweek means a little bit more than it did last time these two teams met.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be a fun one. I don't think I'm going to drive out to Abilene Christian on a Tuesday night. I'll be completely honest with you. So I'll probably be right here in this chair watching TCU and pulling up a couple other games on my screens as well. I'm pretty interested in Kansas, Nebraska as well. And then also Baylor traveling up to UT Arlington. UT Arlington has been kind of an enigma this year. They've been really, really good at times, pretty awful at other times. This is one of those midweeks where, like we've been talking about with the Bears, just handle your business, right? You're at the point in your trajectory under Mitch Thompson where it's handle your business time with some of these teams. So I would like to see that from Baylor on Tuesday. I was actually tempted to drive to that one rather than TCU Abilene Christian because that one's only 30 minutes from my house.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Maybe I'll still make my way out to Arlington for that game. And then weekends. Go ahead. No,
with Baylor UTA, number one, I've actually been to that stadium. No game was played, but just checked it out. I kind of like it, even though it's not crazy. But I like it. It's a baseball stadium. But the second part is Baylor has two UTA guys on their roster, one being Tice Armstrong, the other being Cade Dodson. So a little bit personal ties there along the way, maybe emotional on one side or the other. Just a little extra juice on a midweek matchup. If I were you, I would go, but I'm also not you.
We'll see. We'll see. I do have my obligations of covering TCU baseball still that I have to fulfill. So
yeah, you're a little bit different than I. You can't really do whatever you want like I can.
It's true. You're just the freest man I've ever met in my life. Let's move on to the weekend series here. Some really interesting ones. I don't know that there's necessarily one that stands out to me. Maybe there's one that stands out to me as kind of the series of the week. But you do have UCF traveling to Kansas. I believe that would probably be qualified as the series of the week, the top two teams in the standings. BYU travels to Houston. Baylor travels to Cincinnati. Oklahoma State travels to Kansas State. Arizona travels to TCU. West Virginia on the road in Lubbock against Texas Tech. And then Utah traveling to Tempe to play Arizona State. Of those series, which ones are you going to have your eyes on the most?
I will physically make my way down to Kansas UCF. Apparently, we're going full Jayhawk with me at this point. That's going to be 3 games in the course of about 8 days for me being in front of the Jayhawks, which is what I made my bread and butter on last year. And then Cincinnati Baylor is a fun one as well because both of those programs are fun for us to watch win, and then they're also kind of puzzling to watch lose. So somebody has to win that series, somebody has to lose it. One of those where I don't know what I'm going to do in the pick'em. I don't want to think about it. It'll be one of those where I have a private conversation with my family, God, and others. Maybe make an iPhone note message at the end with I'm choosing whoever, 100% committed. But until that moment, I don't know where I'm going to go with that one. So those two are ones that will have my full attention.
As long as the iPhone note says, please respect my decision and please respect my privacy, you'll be totally fine.
I miss when they used to throw in no interviews. Like, I really want to interview you about this.
Yeah. Oh man, Noah, but why didn't you pick the Knights? I will say this, UCF fans on Twitter, very appreciative of the Flyover League, those that have listened. Very salty at the folks who did not pick them to beat West Virginia this weekend. I don't know if you've encountered that.
Which would be all of us except JD.
That's right.
Blind squirrel, nut, something like that.
Yeah, there's a saying. I think that's going to do it, though, for this episode of the Flyover League. For Noah, I am Jamie. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure you've liked and subscribed. Go to the YouTube channel. Do all of the things. This is the promo area at 1 hour and 24 minutes in to the show where you're clearly all still locked in. Thank you so much for listening. We will be back again next week to break down another weekend of incredible action all across the Big 12.